Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Transportation Standing Committee today, December 13th. We are starting at 1:31, pretty much on time. So I'm going to call us to order and do a land acknowledgement. I want to thank everybody for being here. It is a short agenda. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. So I will just say that I am Pam Lovelace, District 13. We've got everybody here except Councillor Outhit, who sends his regrets today. So I'll move to the approval of minutes. That's for November the 23rd. Thank you, Councillor Purdy. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cuttle, thank you so much. There is a note that our updated minutes were distributed. I think everyone has received that from the clerk, so thank you, Elizabeth, for doing that. Approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Madam Clerk, is there anything to add? Nope.
There are no additions or deletions from the clerk's office.
Wonderful, thank you. Councillor Cuttle? Thank you. Seconder? Thank you, Councillor Purdy. Excellent. Moving on. Sorry, we have to vote on that. Call for the question. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion carries. Business arising out of the minutes. There are none. Call for a declaration of conflict of interest. No? We're good? Okay. Motions of reconsideration, there are none. Motions of rescission, there are none. Consideration of deferred business, there are none. Notice of the table manners, there are none. So correspondence, petitions, delegations. Madam Clerk?
No correspondence has been received by the clerk's office.
Thank you so much. Do we have any petitions, Council?
We have not received any petitions.
And no petitions. Excellent. Okay, 10.3 presentations. 10.3.1 equitable considerations regarding winter parking ban. Do we have Daniel Lametti in person? Oh, we do. Excellent. So Daniel, you'll be, oh yes, here we go. You do have some slides, so Elizabeth is going to get you set up there. Excellent. Welcome.
Oh, right. Okay. There we go. Thank you.
Okay, great. And so clerk will also give you kind of a heads up when you're at your 30 seconds. So thank you. Go ahead. Thanks for being here today.
Great. Thank you so much for having me to speak on this topic. And I appreciate rescheduling this presentation. I believe I was supposed to present at your last meeting, but I was actually in a car accident, ironically. And so thanks for the reschedule. So I'm here to talk to you about the winter parking ban and solutions that better account for residents who only have street parking and no other option. So as I'm sure everybody on this council is aware, on this committee is aware, that after snowfall, Halifax bans street parking for needed snow clearing. This ban is applied citywide overnight. And I should say, it's much better than the model that it replaced, but there are still problems. And the main problem is that there are hundreds of tickets given out each night the ban is applied. And so this is publicly available data from 2022, 9 parking ban nights, and on average, 458 tickets were given out on each of these nights. Last year, 2023, again, publicly available data on the halifax.ca website, 7 parking ban nights at an average of just over 550 tickets were given out on each night. Now, this was the only data that I could find available online, but if you just do a Google News search, you'll find articles going back to 2015, talking about the huge number of tickets that are given out whenever the parking ban is applied. So this is, I think this is a long-standing problem, and it's really impacting residents who can least afford it, right? So folks who can't afford to have a house with a driveway or can't afford to rent an off-street parking space. And then, of course, it's also a major problem for snow removal crews and everybody else in the city, right? Because these cars are blocking the streets from being cleared. So, why does this problem persist? Why is this a problem? Well, I think, we need to recognize that there are many residents that only have street parking, right? So they don't have a private parking space, and the street is the only place where they can leave their car. And in many areas of the city, there's just no accessible off-street parking. So in the North End, for instance, I don't think there's any public off-street parking lots. You kind of have to drive your car downtown to leave it somewhere overnight. And there's just no affordable off-street parking in many areas of the cities. You have to rent a spot on a monthly basis, right? We're talking $150, $200 a month. And, the cost of living has skyrocketed. Who can afford that? And then, of course, the housing crisis has just made everything worse in that you can no longer shop around, right, for an apartment that has a parking spot. If you find a place that meets your requirements and you need a car for work or school and the place doesn't have a parking spot, well, you better take it because, there isn't a huge supply of affordable housing in Halifax right now. So I looked at, what do other cities do? I looked at 3 other cities in Canada and 1 in the US. Montreal, Quebec, this is a city that I'm very familiar with. I lived there for many years, had a car, didn't have a driveway, parked it on the street like many other people. And what Montreal does is that after a large snowfall, they selectively apply parking bans to individual residential streets. And these bans are applied during the day or at night. And what's nice about this model is that residents can simply move their car to a neighboring street while their street is being cleared. They also offer more than 2,000 free off-street parking spaces in municipal lots while snow clearing is happening. So multiple options here, multiple places for residents to park their vehicles, while their streets are being cleared. They're getting cars off the street. Ottawa, Ontario, so lots of snow. Like Montreal, they selectively apply parking bans to individual residential streets using, in this case, temporary signage. So the signs go up, letting you know that your street's going to be cleared that day or that evening, and you simply move your car to another street or to one of the 5 free parking lots that they offer throughout the city when snow clearing is taking place. So they're giving residents options here. They're acknowledging that some folks only have street parking. Now you might be thinking Montreal and Ottawa, these are big sort of central cities. Halifax, smaller city, different climate. Let's look at St. John's, Newfoundland. So here's a coastal city, smaller city. What do? Like Montreal, like Ottawa, they selectively apply snow clearing parking bans to streets at night according to an online schedule. Schedule goes up, you can check to see, is my street going to be cleared tonight? Yes, it is. Then you can move your car to a neighboring street or to one of 6 free parking lots that the city offers for off-street parking when snow removal is happening. And, there's very clear language on the website acknowledging that some folks, might not have a driveway. They only have on-street parking, and, they suggest that folks park their cars in one of these free public parking lots. So they're giving people options. Here's just an example of how St. John's selectively applies their winter parking bans. So they literally put up a map and they highlight, these are the streets that are going to be, the residential streets that are going to be cleared tonight. If you live on one of these streets, please park your car on a neighboring street or in a public lot. Finally, I looked at Portland, Maine, so another coastal city, smaller city than Halifax, but similar climate. They get a lot of sort of freeze thaw like we do. They have a very similar model to ours in that they apply an overnight parking ban after a snowstorm. It's citywide. There are no exceptions here. But what they do is they offer free overnight parking at all city schools, community centers, and stadiums while the parking ban is being applied. So again, they're giving residents options. And they acknowledge on their website that the city offers these options to folks who can only park on the street. So key themes from these 5 cities. The first is that they all acknowledge that street parking, it's not a choice for many of the residents. It's the only option. And the city websites provide residents with alternatives. And so those alternatives come in the form of free overnight parking when bans are applied in city-owned lots or on city property, or selective clearing of residential streets. So what can we as a city take away from these models? What changes can we make to make parking a little bit easier for folks who only have street parking? Well, the first thing we could do is provide residents with resources. So right now on the halifax.ca website, there's actually, no alternative parking options listed. There is a webpage that talks about the winter parking ban, and there's a nice video that describes the ban and how it works, and it simply ends with, please remove your vehicle from the street. There's no information about, where you should put your vehicle if the street is, your only option. So if there are lots out there available to people, they should be, made, they should be posted on the halifax.ca website so that we all have this information. The second thing we could do is provide alternative parking when the parking ban is applied. So off-street parking, for instance, at Halifax Public Schools and other city-owned property. You could monitor who's using these spots using the Hotspot parking app. And, it could be free, that's my preferred model, or for some sort of small fee. And then the third alternative, the third option, is that parking bans could be selectively applied to residential streets, just like St. John's, Montreal, and Ottawa do. And so, I would keep the parking ban for key transit routes. Those routes need to be cleared, right? Buses need to run, but I would selectively apply parking bans to residential streets prior to cleaning so that folks can simply move their cars to neighboring streets or to off-street parking. And again, this is a model that many residents are already familiar with because it's the model that's used for street cleaning, right? On certain nights, you can't park on certain sides of the street. So just to conclude my presentation here, and thanks again for the time, I just want to repeat this because I think this is, if you take anything away from this presentation, it's this. Street parking is not a choice for many residents. It's the only option. Supporting these residents, it benefits everybody, right? The more cars that are off the street, the easier it is for cleaning crews to do their jobs and clear the streets so that people can get around, by car, by transit, by bicycle, right? So helping these residents benefits everyone. Admittedly, this is a small problem compared to many of the city's problems. There's housing, there's transportation, you name it, right, affordability, but it's a very, very fixable problem, and it's a problem that I think is only gonna get worse because of the housing crisis, because we're increasing density on residential lots. There's gonna be more folks who are forced to park on the street, and we need to provide these individuals with off-street parking options when the winter parking ban is applied. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you, Daniel. Excellent presentation. Really appreciate you being here today. I don't see any speakers, but I do. Oh, I do. Councillor Cuttle, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for that presentation, and I recognize that this is this is an issue, that handing out parking tickets is not solving the problem of on-street parking during snowstorms. We know that the city doesn't have the capacity to go and tow all the cars at tickets. There's cars left on streets, they get the tickets, but it's still impeding snow plowing, and it's not prioritizing safety or transit when that happens. I think we really need to think about why we have the snow ban, the parking ban in the winter, the snow, and it's really to help with the snow clearing. And then we have to say, well, is it being effective? And I think you've just demonstrated that it's not effective because we're handing out 11,000 tickets. We're certainly not towing 11,000 cars. So are we really, achieving what it is that we are hoping to achieve with the snow ban? So I think you raised some excellent points there, and also provide some good examples from other cities about, are there options for
Is there a question, Councillor?
Yeah, I'm getting there. Thanks. Are there other options to look at. So I'm just going back, I'm just trying to pull up your presentation, but I see we just have your letter. You mentioned three things. One was selective parking ban, winter parking options during snow ban. What was the first one that you mentioned?
Am I on now? Okay. Well, the first thing I think is just providing residents with resources, right? So right now, there just isn't any information on the halifax.ca website about like where people should park if they only have street parking. So it's possible that there are like public lots that I don't know about and that other people don't know about, right? Or other options for residents. So I think just providing that information, if it exists, is a starting point. And then the other two that you mentioned, so providing alternative off-street parking in city-owned property, and then selectively clearing residential streets so people can move their car to a neighboring street while their street is being cleared.
All right, thank you. I would like to make a motion then. Can I do that based on this presentation?
Does the clerk have the motion?
Pardon?
Does the clerk have the motion? I don't think so. Maybe we could
I could send
take
it
this
to her.
away, and you can present a motion.
Okay, I'll
As
do
a
that.
notice of
I'll do
motion.
that. Okay, then I'll do that at the next meeting. But I think you provide some good ideas to look into, and I'll make a motion looking at options, what options exist for selective parking bans and information and parking options during snow bans. I'll move that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you so much, Daniel. I look forward to seeing this motion coming forward and how we can communicate this better to the public. Really appreciate you being here today.
Help in any way I can. So, if you need.
We'll be in touch.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate your time today, Daniel. We're going to move to our next presenter, who's been, I believe, coming in virtually. Is that correct? Yes. Matt Stickland. Is Matt on the line with us?
I think so. Hello?
Hey, good to see you, Matt.
Hello.
This
Yes,
is
hello.
really cool. Okay, Matt.
It is. It really is.
Yeah, it is super cool. So we're going to send this over to you now. You're going to be talking about transportation zoning and evidence-based design changes. Over to you. Thank you.
Yes, hello. My name is Matt Stickland. I'm the president of the Legal Road Users Bicycle Club, and I am coming to you today live from the automotive hellscape that is Ottawa, as I'm visiting my parents for Christmas. I just want to start off this presentation because I forget sometimes when I get excited to say that for the first time in about 5 years of watching City Council, I'm excited about this budget process. I think Councillor Outhit's motion has a lot of potential, which I'm going to touch on here when we talk about strategic priorities. And I would also like to reinforce the fact that the staff that are currently working on active transit are doing a good job. I think we should empower them more, give them more resource, and let them, give them the whole recap budget maybe. But anyways, what we're talking about here today is how I think the city should plan transportation moving forward. And I would like to share with you my experience in trying to plan foreign port visits with naval officers, which is an exercise in herding cats, mainly because everyone wants to do something different. Much like the transportation infrastructure, everyone kind of wants different things out of it. So getting a broad consensus is often very, very hard. So we're going to get to how to fix that at the end, but that's where we're starting from. Next slide, please. All right, so here's a framework on how to herd cats. You have to use evidence to identify achievable objectives in line with what you actually want to achieve. You need to plan for those objectives, and then you achieve your stated goals. Oh, sorry, and I'm going to be focusing on well-maintained, the three priorities that I'm focusing on: well-maintained infrastructure, safe infrastructure, and the smooth flow of traffic. Next slide, please. And I just want to highlight here too that there are a lot of strategic priorities that either directly apply to transportation or could apply to transportation. I think that's part of the problem, but only 10 minutes, we don't have a lot of time. Anyways, how much do our roads cost us? Do we know? I don't think we do. I think that we know how much they cost to maintain, but I don't think we do a very good job of accounting for the externalities of car use. For example, how much are we robbing from our local economies by making businesses store private vehicles? Is that the best use of that land? Are we getting the most revenue out of that land that we could? Is that accounted for anywhere in our budget processes? Do we know how much our roads are actually costing us? Not directly the maintenance spending, we know how much that is. Next slide, please. Because adjusted for inflation, we spend about $30 million a year on our roads, on road maintenance alone, trying to keep them well maintained. This is not something we have a lot of success doing. Next slide, please. As you can see, this is accumulated data, 20 years of payment quality data. We used to do Surface Duress Index. We switched to Pavement Quality Index in 2016, 2017, but those criteria they're not the same, but essentially it's the way we've kept track of the quality of our streets, and that is consistent throughout the past 20 years, and it was a base 10 scale versus a base 100 scale. So even though it's not a one-for-one comparison, it does give you an idea that for the over $500 billion we have spent $500 million we have spent on roads over the past 20 years, they have gone from a B+ quality to a D. Next slide, please. And this is not new information to the city. If you look through the IMP, you can see all the evidence that supports our transportation infrastructure choices and supports council's priorities or strategies or intentions or whatever the appropriate word there is to move away from our automotive monopoly. Next slide, please. And according to the IMP, we don't really have any evidence to suggest that our automotive infrastructure monopoly is in any way, shape, or form in line with our priorities. Next slide. But the good news is, it is very possible to build a transportation network in line with our priorities. All we need to do is, do it. Next slide, please. When it comes to safe streets, one of the things that we like to, the hierarchy of controls is just the best way to keep people safe. If you don't want to avoid getting bitten by a shark, don't go swimming in the ocean, go swimming in a pool instead. It's a pretty straightforward principle, but essentially, if you want to keep vulnerable road users safe, keep the danger, i.e. drivers, away from them. What do we do in the HRM is kind of the exact opposite of this hierarchy. Next slide, please. Twice, sorry. Yeah, once more. Yeah, so essentially the flags at crosswalks, the education campaigns, all of this is administrative controls and personal protection. It's putting the emphasis on safety on me, the vulnerable road user. And while that is happening, you are also taking my tax money and prioritizing car travel and car convenience, which essentially is telling me you're taking my tax money, you're putting it in automotive infrastructure and putting my responsibility for my safety on me and my wallet. Essentially saying that other people's private vehicles are more important than my life. And that is an issue of legitimacy and governance, which is a big capital P, capital S political science debate, which is definitely not doable in a 10-minute conversation, 10-minute presentation. Next slide, please. A couple of weeks ago, the Transportation Advisory Committee got a presentation from a guy named Paul Young. One of those two is correct. And he explained to them how 30-kilometer-an-hour streets is the way to keep everyone safe on the streets. The country of Wales has done a huge study on it. There is just boatloads of evidence that says 30-kilometer-an-hour streets is safe, and the only way to get 30-kilometer-an-hour streets is to design streets for 30 kilometers an hour, which is something we don't do. Next slide, please. For example, where I live in Cole Harbour, none of the streets are designed to be safe. However, council has the explicit power to change the way we use our roads. The reason the province is not changing speed limit signs for you is because they are following where the power is, and the power here rests with council. They are unwilling to put posted speed limits on roads where the streets are not designed for those speeds. The reason the province is not giving you 30-kilometer-an-hour posted speeds is because our streets are not designed for it. We don't have a speeding problem, we have a design problem. And this is not taking a shot at Councillor Purdy. I honestly believe Councillor Purdy is one of the best councillors that we have on our council right now. But I don't think that you guys are supported to get what you want to do. This motion, as we all know, is going to be debated after this, and I think it's going to look a lot different once that debate happens. But the processes, like the government would run a lot more efficiently if you guys had support for your own ideas, so these conversations could happen. So if there is an issue, with the islands on Colby Drive. There is a system in place where counselors can get a full understanding of what is, what the issue is, and a full understanding of, they can communicate. You guys can communicate the problem you actually want to solve, and have resources with evidence to what is actually going to solve that problem. For example, if there is cars, as this motion, the paperwork behind this motion indicates, if there are drivers driving down Colby Drive fast enough to hit one of these islands and land in someone's lawn, the issue is not the islands, but the fact that Colby Drive is designed in such a way that someone can drive fast enough to flip their car onto a lawn. Next slide, please. And again, I tried to find a visual screenshot that didn't have anyone's name in this, because although this is fundamentally and 100% within your power to control, this has been in the power of every councillors to control since 1996. And I do not think anyone on this council deserves extra blame for the decisions of councils past. And in fact, I think this council specifically has done a lot of work to try and correct those mistakes. That said, there are 17 reasons why our streets aren't safe. Next slide, please. And one of the things that we need to consider when we're doing transportation planning that I'm not sure that we actually consider is the physics of cars. How much space does each car need, and where does it need it? Modern trucks require 200 to 300 square feet. That is storage wherever they are, all the time in transit, and storage wherever they are going. And if you look at Cole Harbour Parking Lot Central, how much value are we getting out of the land that is currently parking in Cole Harbour, and how much value would we get out of the land if it was shops instead? And how much value would our local economy get if there were more places for small business owners to actually test and grow their businesses? And the other thing, when we talked about like my safety and how my tax dollars are being spent and government legitimacy, one of the things that I don't hear talked about at all in this transportation debate is that our transportation network is extremely vulnerable to like 5 people just crossing at designated crosswalks repeatedly. And the issue that is going to keep cropping up, I think, for this government, this level of government, is that as this government's legitimacy in transportation...
Sorry to interrupt you, Matt. I just want to let you know that the 30-second timer is here. So you've got 30 seconds to wrap up.
Okay. Anyway, so as legitimacy erodes, you don't need a lot of people to basically fundamentally destroy the capability of our transportation network due to the physics of cars. Next slide. The way we design streets essentially prioritizes speed, so that when they're not packed with people, i.e. not at rush hours, that is when most people are driving fast. And you can see that 75% of all incidents happen outside of the times when the transportation network is most in use. And with the attachment that is also on this agenda, you can see that most of the incidents with vulnerable road users are happening in built infrastructure.
Thank you, Matt. We're now at time. So I'm going to invite any councillors if they have a question for you. Really appreciate you being here today. I have a question from Councillor Tris-Purdy for you, Matt.
Yes.
Oh, well, thank you, Matt. I just wanted to say you made me blush. So thanks for that. No questions, though. However, do we have a copy of this presentation? Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Was it circulated with the thing? Okay, wonderful. I will go through it in more detail, and maybe we can grab a coffee sometime to talk, Matt. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor Purdy. So, Matt, I will just, I just have a couple of comments. I really appreciate you making this presentation. I will say that if the municipality did have the authority, that wonderful crosswalk in Hubbards that HRM paid to install that connected our library, our public library, to the waterfront would not have been removed by the province. So, while I wish that we had authority over our roads, we certainly have some more work to do, and I also welcome sitting down and having a coffee with you. So thank you again, Matt, for being here today. Sorry? Thank you so much for being here.
I'm not supposed to speak, so.
Yeah, so again, thanks so much for being here. All the best in Ottawa, and we look forward to seeing you.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. So we now have, thank you very much, have a list of public participation. We have 2 individuals who have signed up. Martin Williams, I'm going to ask you to come on up to the podium. And sort of the same deal as we saw before, Elizabeth will hold up, yes, you, podium, wherever, if you want to sit down, wherever you feel most comfortable. And Elizabeth will hold up the timer for you. You have 5 minutes. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. I'm afraid that my presentation is a little bit thrown together in the last minute, so it is not going to be nearly as smooth as the previous two presenters. They were quite something. So I just have my rough notes here to read from, so please excuse me if I'm a little hesitant. I'm looking at the review of the first 5 years of our Towards Zero strategy, which is very clear that we were adopting Vision Zero methodology and ethos, and it was a very good strategy. I'm uncertain of its current status, but it was very well considered. The person who drafted it seemed to understand what was going on really well, and there were a lot of good insights and a lot of action items in it. So I'm specifically going to speak about vulnerable road users because for those people, so mobility scooter users, wheelchair users, cyclists and pedestrians, injury incidents and fatal incidents have sadly increased over the first 5 years. And I want to say that the incident analysis provided by staff is really excellent. It's very comprehensive, and even prior to 2018, the reporting has always been very good, and the statistics, and it gives us a lot of insight. But overall, I'm extremely worried, and there's a few things that I wanted to pick up on. I should add, we had a really serious incident on Monday night. A 22-year-old student, I think, or young person, was struck by a bus driver turning right at a signalized intersection. And it is these turning movements at signalized intersections which you have heard a lot of advocacy on from people, from volunteers, saying that they need to be addressed. And it is unacceptable that we still have this very, very high level of avoidable danger at signalized intersections, but it's good that staff are at least not, it's clear in the reporting that remains a problem. So staff say there are limited hotspots within the region as reported collisions are spread across the network. I spend a lot of time looking at your incident mapping. I'm not an engineer, but I have a geography degree, and I know there are hotspots. There are definitely hotspots, and there is a high injury network, which is a kind of fundamental of Vision Zero, that you start with this map, this high injury network, and you see where these incidents are happening, and then you know what roads you need to address most urgently. So that is an issue that I think we need to reconsider. I can also see from those high injury network, and that's roads like Quinpool and Brunswick Street, Joe Howe, Dutch Village Roads, and some roads in Dartmouth, Main Street and Alderney Drive. That speed is going to be a problem. I can see from the speed display sign data that you have a speed of 65 kilometers an hour on Quinpool Road. And considering that is a pedestrian shopping street, that seems like a health and safety, kind of something that needs to be acted upon quite urgently. And I think that we need to develop a more urgent approach to these issues that we've just lived with, but which actually cause a huge amount of harm and are not good for drivers or anyone else. And look at things like a more tactical distribution of road space, something like a road diet. So a policy where, perhaps even more urgently than this, but at least whenever a road is resurfaced, you look at simple distribution of road space as a policy requirement if that road is within this high injury network. So if it's a road like Quinpool or Joe Howe, where you've got the clustering of incidents, that it must be treated in some way. So something like bus lanes, or narrower traffic lanes, something that shrinks the space and provides safer speeds, particularly as these roads like Joe Howe are increasingly residential, and they're where people might want to just walk out instead of taking the car and cross the road to buy their milk or whatever. They can't serve any longer as these speedways, and neither I'm sure that the police can manage with enforcing the level of danger that's on it. And I live on Lacewood, and it's similar. It's a highway, and there are children that walk to school, and they risk their lives to walk to school, and it's upsetting to see. So I'm going to cut to the chase because I have about to come to the end of my time. I would like to see, at a minimum, at a very bare minimum from this, proposal by you to ask that stakeholders come together in a meeting with staff and produce their own report. So not a report just written by staff, as we've seen here, but a report on the first 5 years of Vision Zero, written by the stakeholders with their words, unedited by staff, just to give you an insight on how it's gone, which is less focused on what staff think. And I think that's a reasonable proposition.
Thank you, Martin. Really appreciate your time today. I do have a question for you, though, from Councillor Purdy.
Oh, there we go. Thank you for that presentation. Very concerning, horrible every time you hear or see an article about someone getting hit on a crosswalk, no less. That makes it even more gut-wrenching. Who are the stakeholders that you are referring to in this collaborative approach that you're proposing?
Go ahead, Martin.
Is my microphone on? Yeah, that's a good question. So the stakeholders are Ecology Action, Halifax Cycling Coalition, the Crosswalk Safety Society of Nova Scotia, Walk and Roll, and they also include other people like the police. I'm not sure if they are, but certainly you should have someone from the hospital. We had Rob Green speak out about the conflicts. He spoke out against the combining rights movements for traffic with pedestrians because he sees the results in the hospital of just how severe the injuries are. So somebody from the hospital who has that perspective as well, and that kind of person has been very influential in Montreal and the changes they've made there. So those are the ones I'm aware of, but Brad Ankovish will be able to fill you in on the others.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. Thank you for being here today. We have a presentation, public participation from Walter Strachan. I hope that I've said your name right, Walter. Strachan?
Very few people do.
Oh, excellent. Well, come on up to the microphone. I'm happy that you're happy. And you've got 5 minutes, sir, and Elizabeth will hold up the timer so you know when you're 30 seconds and 5 seconds. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity for me to support Councillor Trish's motion concerning those beloved barriers. I couldn't have had a better segue than the gentleman just 2 talkers ago, because that's the street, those are the barriers of which we speak. I live at 455 Colby Drive, and that's right in approximately in the middle of these barriers that start at Flagstone and end at Greenwich. There's approximately 7 of them that go along the road and up the hill. So this motion is particularly important, seeing that the residents, like me, basically who are directly impacted by them, I believe had no input into their installation in the first place. It was all a big, what are they doing, and how did they get here? So that's important, that we maybe have something to say through a councillor to get this rectified, because the successful motion and subsequent action will allow us to be heard on this as we are here. I'm here today because I believe my neighbors have no idea, are unaware of the financial impact, because that's really what this started with me. They were aggravation, but I didn't realize that the traffic barriers will cause them money when they have significant work done on their properties, or when they require moving vans and the like, because they'll obstruct the street and they will need traffic control. I this summer got 3 quotes, 1 refused altogether, to redo my driveway without applying a $2,000 over and above plus HST cost to the driveway because they needed 2 days of traffic control. The way these things are done, you remove them one day, compact them, and come back. It's a pretty significant amount. And basically, as the motion notes, the traffic barriers in this place were ineffective, okay, simply in calming traffic. I think the motion says that. The reason for the motion supports it as well. Unless HRM has other data to the contrary, Les agrees that this is a valid statement and the barriers did not meet their intended purpose. My observational data more than supports that claim. From my porch, which I have witnessed near misses, 2 accidents, several street trees destroyed by vehicles because they get to pinch points, as well as numerous dings and repairs to the barriers themselves. They get whacked all the time. And also, bicycle vehicle interactions are not possible. If they're coming, especially if you're coming up the hill, by all nature, you accelerate. That's just human nature. The bicycle is there. At that pinch point, that car has to stop completely while that poor bugger, and I've been that bugger myself, has to pedal up that hill. It's a tough run. So it's just a matter of time before that gets worse. I'm convinced my neighbors will have similar stories if I canvass them. They're just simply, in my opinion, unaware. I suspect the cost of barriers, repairs, and replacements of trees, as well as the cost of plowing around these barriers, has been significant and will only increase over their original planned life cycle. Okay? There's another cost beyond the capital costs of the failed traffic calming experiment. And there's nothing wrong with experiments. Sometimes they go bad and you've got to reverse them. And the ongoing cost of maintenance that HRM did not consider before designing construction. The cost is the financial burden, as I mentioned, assessed to each homeowner who requires traffic control when improving their property or moving. Personally, I received 3 quotes, as I said. A 4th failed to respond at all because it's just the productivity around it is so slow because of the start-stops that the costs they were twice the amount that some neighbors of friends of mine had in off-streets for the same square footage or square meters. We need to accept that this application was not thoroughly analyzed before implementation. Just accept it. We all do imperfect work. I worked in a consulting engineering practice for 40 years. We definitely did imperfect work, but we always kept the standard of care. We always felt that we were above. Okay? I've mentioned those 2 accidents. In one car, left the control up and hit the power pole in front of my house and got fetched up. The other car hit the curb, hit the barrier, rolled over and ended up in the driveway, in the lawn across the street. Thank God the kids that normally play there weren't there that day. Someday, someone's going to go off the road, they're going to hit somebody walking on the sidewalk, and they're going to get injured or worse. So I know there has to find the money to do it, but this problem won't go away. I yield my time.
Thank you, Walter. Thank you so much for being here today and presenting and speaking to us. We do, just don't go away, sir. We do have a question from Councillor Cuddle for you.
I'll respond to the chair. Thank you, colleague. I'm just wondering, when were these installed?
I'd say 17, 18? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. Okay, colleagues, we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is information items brought forward, and we have none. Reports, today we have none, but we do have a motion from Councillor Purdy. So Councillor Purdy, I'm going to ask you to put that on the floor. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the Transportation Standing Committee direct the Chief Administrative Officer to prepare a staff report outlining the options for removal of the traffic islands on Colby Drive, including any draft amendments that might be required to the Traffic Calming Administrative Order 2021-005 OP. So moved.
Is there a seconder? seconded by Councillor Cuddle.
Thank you, Councillor Cuddle. Thank you. I'm going to read the reason for the motion here so I don't go off course. So in 2019, the islands were installed on one portion of Colby Drive as a pilot traffic calming initiative. These islands have not been reproduced in HRM as they were ineffective in lowering the speed of drivers. However, there has been an unintended consequence of the islands in their placement to the residents directly impacted on that portion of Colby Drive. The islands require that any resident who wishes to have any work done on their property, repaving the driveway, lawn maintenance, landscaping, or any work involving heavy machinery or trucks, including moving trucks, must pay for traffic control at their own expense, as we heard from the presenter, which is $2,000 a day plus HST, which is quite a significant financial hit. The island installations have caused an unreasonable hardship for the residents directly impacted, while not providing the intended traffic calming result. So they also pose safety hazards, as residents have reported seeing cars flipped into yards by clipping the curb of the island and subsequently losing control, and also the inability of a car and a bike to pass through the narrowed portion of the street caused by the island at the same time. So it's prudent to look at options to have these islands removed prior to the planned recapitalization of the street, which would not be for many years, and I spoke with staff about this. We're looking at, it could be like 20 years. So we actually need traffic calming on this part of the street. And so we're looking for options to replace the islands. Let's put in some traffic calming and prior to the 20-year recapitalization of the street, and let staff come up with the options, and hopefully we'll see something earlier than that. So I hope you will support this for the residents in my community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I can't support your motion for what should be very obvious reasons, but I appreciate the need for investigation. And so I have proposed an amendment. I've sent it to the clerk, and I'll just speak for a second, and then I'll tell you what that is. But one of the values we adopted in 2016 was to be an evidence-based decision-making body. And so far, what I've heard is anecdotal and suppositional rather than evidence. And so what I think would be great, and I drove it today, so, and I drove it on my motorcycle too. Luckily, I didn't get caught in the rain for very much. And a friend of mine just lives off of Colby on a little crescent there, so we went together, and they love it. A young family with a dog there, walk it every day. And they want traffic calming of some sort and are afraid if the little islands come out that people will just continue to speed there. So anyway, my own experience driving it today, around 12:15 p.m., was both cars coming and the car in my lane both appropriately slowed down at the pinch point. I noticed this because obviously I was coming up behind them and I was getting closer to them as they were slowing down. And no one flipped a car, no one behaved erratically. And so what would be important to look at this is if we amended this to say, rather than a staff report looking at getting rid of them, would be a staff report that actually measures the effectiveness and impacts of the traffic islands and investigates any changes that might be necessary, which may involve removing them or installing other types of devices. But I think to just jump to the conclusion that we have to remove them, I think the important thing is, and also too, staff could literally come back to us because council has no authority over the streets. The traffic authority could come back to us and say, yeah, whatever, council, under the Motor Vehicle Act, we put them in, we decide if they come out. And so the staff report could literally just say, no. So rather, let's get data. Let's have a measurement of the collisions. Let's have a measurement of the speeds. Let's see that documented. And then we can have options to see what might be necessary or what might be prudent. But I can't support your motion as it is. So anyway, the amendment would be where we get to prepare a staff report that measures the effectiveness and impacts of the traffic islands at Colby Drive and investigates any change that may be necessary, which could include removal of the traffic islands.
So actually, from wise advice from our solicitor, this is not a friendly amendment.
Doesn't have to be friendly, we can vote on it.
So, I'm just letting you, just
I
letting
suspect it wouldn't be
the other colleagues here know, Councillor Cleary, that this would not be a friendly amendment. So just want to be clear on that. Thank you. That has been seconded by Councillor Mason. Councillor Mason?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, someone hit that so fast that they flipped their car. They were speeding, and that's on them. They should be driving for the conditions of the road. They should lose their license. That's not on us. That's on them. Don't drive like that. And we see that all the time. I saw a flipped car at Preston and Jubilee. I don't know how that happened. I think he got hit, but they were both speeding, one trying to like make the other one. That's fast. That's operator error. So I will support the amendment because we don't have any data here. We have anecdotal statements. I'm afraid to the speaker, I can't accept that it's a given that these have failed. My understanding is that there's been some limited data collection and that it did show a small decrease in speed, but also let's keep in mind, if these are put in 2019, all the data collections during COVID. So we're only just up to actual traffic volumes now. That means that the measurement should be now going forward so that we actually see what the speed reduction is. Because people were able to drive faster when there were half as many cars on the road. I certainly, I have family who live in Cole Harbour who actually support more traffic calming like this as fast as possible. So I know it's not universal, though I know also that on Colby Connects that the Facebook poll was definitely 51% in favor of removing them. But, that's a data point, but that's not the decision maker right there. And as far as traffic control goes in this street, and I'm sorry to say this to the resident who spoke, but I have lots of streets, Roby, Coburg, Jubilee, where you have to get traffic control if you're paving your driveway. Like that is a condition of living on a busy street in a big city. And I can't see saying we're going to deliberately design streets so wide that that goes against everything we're doing. We know that the traffic lane should be 3.3 to 3.6 meters at max in a street like this so that cars are not encouraged to drive 80 kilometers an hour in a residential zone. If we overbuild these streets, then we're going to have people going at a speed limit that is absolutely dangerous and catastrophic and will kill a human who's hit if the car is going that speed. So our goal is actually, with respect, all due respect to the area councillor, to make cars go more slowly. That's what we want. And so I would support the amendment because I think if the data shows it's not effective, that's a different conversation. I wouldn't rush to take them out, though, because that's an unbudgeted hundreds of thousands or millions to remove this. I don't see that happening right away when we have all the other issues that we're facing. But let's find out what the story is and let's ask staff for that and throw that to the area councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cuttle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see two things here. One is that, cars are speeding and hitting these and flipping onto people's lawns and doing all other kinds of damage, which would actually indicate that perhaps they're not as effective as intended. The other curious thing is the fact that we haven't used them anywhere else since. I guess my question would be for Brad. In the original motion that Councillor Purdy put forward, would an evaluation come back with that original motion to look at the effectiveness of these in the removal? Would there be some information provided?
So the amended motion is what we're speaking to right now?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if some of that information would come back in the original motion. Would any of that information be included in the original motion?
Well, I think the point is being debated here. Sorry, my apologies. The point being debated here is the original motion speaks directly to removing. In other words, the difference I see between the two motions, one is to assess the impacts of the islands as a first step, all right? Whereas the other one is straight up, come back with options for removal.
Okay, so I will support the data collection as the first step on this, and kind of assess the situation, and from there, make a determination about where we go next. So I will be supporting the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Purdy, did you want to close? Councillor Cleary is also on the, did you want to close? No, I can go now. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So actually, there is data on this. All you have to do is call the traffic calming analyst. So there's been no change in the speed of these vehicles. It went down by one mile per hour after the installation of these. This is not. They need to be removed. We're looking at an option that is not going to take 20 years. People live in Colby because they don't want to live on a busy street. So when you buy a house on a busy street, you know the options of what you're getting into when you buy that house. So this was enforced on the residents without their knowledge and without their ability to speak to any of the negative consequences that would impact them due to these. It's not going to cost millions of dollars to remove these. It's $100,000 to $200,000 perhaps to take them out and replace with speed tables, which do actually slow down the speeds and do not cause undue harm or inconvenience to residents who live by the speed humps. So yeah, we do have the data. We don't need a staff report for data. Just call your traffic calming analyst. And when I was before this meeting, I was at a Citizens on Patrol Christmas brunch, and there was about, I don't know, 12, 16 of them there. And when I mentioned that we were making a motion to remove the islands, there was applause and cheering from the table. So these are not popular. This pilot project has not been repeated anywhere in HRM because it was a failure. So I won't be supporting this amendment, and I would hope that reason would prevail. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cottle on the amendment.
Yeah, so back to the data and collecting the data. I mean, I think the issue we have right now is we don't have any of the data in front of us. And it would be good to have that. So even amending the original motion, maybe as a two-part motion, to include, for the purpose of removing, to have some of the data collection and presented, would be useful, unless Brad is able to speak to the data right here and now.
I'm not really sure that's helpful. We do have the amendment on. Brad?
No, I mean, we're going to have to look at the spectrum of data. I appreciate what's been said here anecdotally, but we have to look through all percentiles and just see what the effectiveness of the islands have been over a certain period of time, and we'll do that. Yeah, and bring it back for your consideration. Obviously, as Councillor Mason mentioned, cost will be a large consideration here, but we'll make sure that all the information is brought back for you for a decision. Also, in the original motion, there was the mention of amending the AO. That is no longer in the amended motion, so that also affects the work that we do and how fast we can get back. So in other words, we can get back faster, because what I understand is you're not asking for consideration to amend the AO.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Call for the question. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye. All opposed? That motion, that amended motion has carried. Anyone else on the main motion? Sorry, no one else on the main motion. So call for the question. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. Okay, thank you, colleagues. Good discussion. Thank you, Councillor Purdy. Moving forward, we go to number 15 on the agenda, which is in camera. We have none. Added items, we have none. Colleagues, any notice of of notices of motion? None. So the date of our next meeting is January 25th, 2024. Call for adjournment, please. Thank you, Councillor Cuddle. We are adjourned. Thank you all. Have a wonderful holiday. See you in 2024.